I am so pleased today to have Sarah LeJeune Wood with us. She is a filmmaker and she is a very creative person. And when I say she's a filmmaker, I don't mean she just stands there and tells people where to walk and what to say. I mean, she writes and she acts and she also edits, which means she has the technical skills to do that. So we're going to have a fascinating conversation on this session of Dialogues with Creators. Stay tuned. Sarah, I kind of like to let people speak for themselves. So tell us first how you came to the Chattanooga area.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. So cool. I love what you're doing to support local artists. And this is just very special. And I'm honored to be here. I ended up in the Chattanooga area in 2016. In the fall of 2016, I moved here from LA. I know that sounds like, oh, how did you get here? Well, I grew up in the Nashville area. And so I ended up studying at UCLA for 2 years in an acting program. And when I finished that program, I felt the call to move back to Tennessee. And so I moved to Nashville for 2 weeks, and then an opportunity to move to Chattanooga opened up. And I was like, sure, I'm open. And so I moved here, met my husband, and I've been planted ever since.
Okay. So meeting a husband has something to do with it.
Yes, definitely. I definitely didn't envision myself in Chattanooga necessarily, but I will say that the entertainment world has opened up so much with technology, and especially for actors with self-taping, that you can pursue this from just about anywhere. And being in Chattanooga right between Atlanta and Nashville is such a sweet spot to be. So I love Chattanooga. I love it. So I'm very happy that this is where the Lord had me end up.
Okay, that's great. It's good to know that you love Chattanooga, because in the past I've known people who didn't. Their whole goal of life is to get out. But I have to say, having been here for 40-ish years plus, the town has changed dramatically from what it might have been in the 60s and 70s. So, and you probably have seen lots of different, like you said, the changing. And so you've probably seen all the different types of changes and there's a word, phases. I'm like, sorry, I'm pregnant. For those who don't know, I'm pregnant and my brain sometimes doesn't work and I can't think of words. You've seen some different phases that Chattanooga has gone through. And I just happen to really love the one that it's currently in. So. Yes. It especially has always been a city, though, I think, that has supported the arts. Yeah. And it's trying to do something with filmmaking as well.
Definitely.
So is your husband a transplant, or has he always been here?
Yeah, he is a Nashville native. He was born and raised in Nashville and then moved here for work maybe 8 years ago or so. And so he's been here for a while, and then he met me, and now we're not going anywhere. And he likes his job, and I love being able to work from home here. And so it's been great. And the flexibility to go to LA if you need, I don't know. We found our sweet spot. So I'm very happy about that.
Wow. We're glad to hear that then. So when did you know that acting and filmmaking would be your life?
Yes, man, that's a good question, because it originally was just acting. And I was not interested in filmmaking whatsoever. I started doing theater when I was younger, probably around 10 years old. I kind of got bit by the theater bug and started doing lots of stage work. I ended up studying theater performance in college. So I really loved theater. And then I remember in high school, I did like a really silly commercial. It's like my only commercial that I've ever booked. And I did a commercial and I hated it. I hated every second. I hated the hurry up and wait. I missed the live audience of the theater. And so I told my mom, never again. I will never do film. And then that didn't pan out the way I thought. I just didn't know I didn't like commercials. Apparently I can hurry up and wait for a film. But so right after I graduated high school, like I said, I went to go study theater, and I ended up filming a movie that I wrote the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college in North Carolina. And it was just one of those labor of love things. I'm 17, 18 years old. I wanted to try my hand at it, and it turned out so cute, and it was such a good experience. And I really got bit by the film bug at that time. And so acting was an immediate, as soon as I started doing that, I was like, well, I love this. And then the film came a little bit later. But I've always loved movies. I've always been a movie quoter, and I'm always trying to figure out what's coming next and trying to guess the plots. And so that the love of film has always been there. I just didn't know that I would love to make films until later.
Okay. What was the first role you had on the stage?
Oh, that's such a good question. I played Brigitte in The Sound of Music in Dixon, Tennessee. And I remember auditioning for it, and I was so nervous. And one of my favorite stories, one of my mom's favorite stories, and I love watching her tell it because she just lights up. But one of her favorite stories of me is she actually watched my audition, because I was 10, 11. I was young. And the pianist, the accompanist, messed up my song. And she said, you just took a breath and you took a step forward and you embraced it and you kept going. And she was like, and that's when I knew. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you knew, because I was panicked and terrified. But yeah, so I got to play Brigitte in The Sound of Music. And so that was my first musical theater stage role. And I loved that. That was super fun.
Well, that was a big one.
Oh yeah.
Being first role.
It was definitely a big bite, and I loved it.
And what was the name of the movie that you wrote when you were 17 or so?
Yeah, so that was called Sway, and it was a jukebox musical, which, for those of you who don't know, it's when you take a famous artist's collection of works and then write a story out of it. So think Mamma Mia would be like that for ABBA, or Across the Universe would be like that for the Beatles. I did Michael Bublé music, so it was like very crooner, easy listening. It was super cute, super sweet, super cheesy. When you're 18, I wanted to write a really fun musical that was, had a good love story. And so anyway, it was really, really sweet. And I never did anything because I don't know if you know, it's very expensive to license music.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. So, so we made the movie. If you want a free DVD, you can email me. I'll send it to you. I can't sell them, but I can give them out for free. But that was fun. It was a good learning experience.
Did you have to write music then?
No. So I took this, I knew the songs that I wanted to use, and I wrote them and I incorporated them into the script. And then we did produce a CD, like we produced a whole album for the film. And that actually ended up being really great. That was a lot of fun. A singer is not really the top of my list of things that I would consider myself talented in, but it worked. It worked. And yeah, so we made a whole CD. We had a music producer who did the arrangements and brought in the instrumentalists, and man, we did it.
So I was sitting here thinking, okay, you're not just someone who performs. You are at the most basic and highest levels at the same time. You are an entrepreneur, which is part of what I talk to people about on this podcast is you don't just perform, but you're doing something that is creating opportunities for other people as well.
Sure. I wish I did it better. I wish I did it better in a sense of, financially able to support others and give them jobs. But I appreciate the sentiment. Yes, I think that there is a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit to this craft. If you're wanting to work on all different sides of the camera and, doing all kinds of things, and you definitely have to have that spirit of creating something from the ground up and putting in the work and the effort. So I definitely appreciate that sentiment for sure.
Right. And it's also very collaborative. I think that many people think the arts are for people that want to sit in a corner and do whatever they do, especially writing. But filmmaking is the most collaborative of the arts, I would think, except,
sure.
Theater obviously is too, and music, in groups. But, I always just look at how many people are at the end of the movie credits,
Oh, yeah.
We're going to,
And I'm so grateful for that because there are so many jobs I can't do. And there are so many jobs I have no interest in doing. And so I am grateful for that, for the collaborative spirit, especially if, if everybody has that collaborative spirit and everyone knows where their talents and gifts are and how they can work well together and bring each other up. There's nothing like that experience.
Yeah,
for sure.
The one that always gets me is I understand directing and where people stand and vocal and acting and all that, but lighting. Like, yes. How do you know that this light is going to work?
Right. I mean, I've seen the diagrams. I conceptually get it, but practically I'm like, it's way over my head. That and audio editing. Man, audio editing that takes a very special kind of person. And I am not that special kind of person.
Yeah, I know that because I have a producer who's brilliant. She gets the whole audio. She hears things I don't even hear.
Right. So, yeah.
And
hands off to her.
So the way I met you was that recently we screened at Dalton State Amazing Gracie, and it's amazing. What was the inspiration or starting point for that film?
Sure. First of all, thank you again for having us there. That was such a sweet, special time to just get to
You were so wonderful. You really know how to do that. Crowd. Deal with people.
Well, it's just talking about what I love. So, yeah. But yes, I'm so grateful we got to go and I'm hopeful that it was inspiring to someone. So yeah, I started writing that before the pandemic. So it was probably the summer of 2019. I had just had a spark of inspiration while I was at a Christian film festival to kind of write a film that was about redemption between a mom and a daughter. Not necessarily because that was something that I was needing in my personal life. I have a lovely relationship with my mom, but it's just really important to me. I think we see a lot of films, and I say this in the best way possible. We see a lot of films like the Kendrick brothers focusing on fathers and sons. And I just want to have that as well for the women and, the world. And so I knew the theme that I wanted to go with. I knew that was kind of where I wanted to lead. And I knew it had to be a comedy because I love writing comedies. And I knew that's how I wanted it to come about. And then at the time, my niece was about 5 years old, my honorary niece, I should say. And she is very similar to the lead character of Gracie in that film. She just is 5 going on 15 and will tell you how it is. And I just love that about her. And so I kind of just emulated her spirit, I guess, in creating the character of Gracie. And I knew that would obviously lend itself to some good comedy moments between the two characters, where you have the 5-year-old, or in the movie, she ends up being like 7. The 7-year-old who is teaching the adult how to be an adult. And so I just saw an opportunity there for the comedy aspect of it, while also creating a beautiful relationship between this aunt and this niece as well, right? It's just a beautiful story about women in general and the different types of relationships they have. So that's kind of how it came about as far as the idea. And then I would tell you, I initially wrote it for the church that made it. So I I was working at the time for a church who makes movies as part of their mission. It's just every year they make a film, and COVID really messed with that. And so we had a lot of extra time for writing. And so I ended up writing this film during COVID, or like doing the most of the editing. I had written it, like I said, just before COVID in 2019, but then during COVID, I was really able to edit it, get where I needed it to go for filming. And then they were like, yep, we're going to make this one next. And they did. We filmed it in June of 2022. And yeah, I also cast the film. And so going through that process of finding a Gracie and finding the mom character and who I was because I wrote it knowing that I was going to be in it. So that was fun. But yeah, it's been many years, definitely a many year process of getting this film made. And it's so rewarding to have it finally be out and I get to share it with people and talk about it.
Yeah. There's so much I can ask you about that. I think it's interesting that a church makes a movie every year.
Yeah.
And they do it professionally. It's not cheesy at all. It looked good. It sounded good. And how did you connect with that church?
Yeah, that's, thank you for saying that. That's very nice. And that is a huge testament to the volunteers that work on that film and their just incredible heart for mission and the messages of the films that they make. Yeah, they are just so dedicated. And the lead pastor who has directed these films, he also has a heart for making sure that each film is better than the last, right? And so I do think that from their first film to now, and then even their next film, they've already made it. They've already filmed it. I think it's in editing right now, but just every film he wants to take it one notch higher. And so he just does a really great job of training those folks and pouring into them. But I got plugged in with them in 2014. They were doing a casting call for the lead in their second film called Fat Chance. And I was in Nashville at the time, and I saw the open call, and I sent in a self-tape this is kind of when self-tapes were just becoming the thing. And I sent in a self-tape and did a callback, and then did like a director session, or we did like a Zoom call, which was a total disaster. I was in Ireland at the time. The only time I've ever been to Ireland. I was in Ireland at the time. The connection was terrible. It was like 3:00 in the morning my time. We hung up, and I told my mom, I was like, well, that's not going to work out. It's like, I tried my best. And then I get home from Ireland, and of course they offered me the role, and the rest is history on that one. But, so I drove to North Carolina. We filmed that movie over about nine weeks. And right in the middle of it, he said, the director was like, well, I was overhearing the director say that their editor had dropped out. And my mom was on set that day, and she was like, you should tell him that you also edit. I was like, Mom, stop. No. And I was so embarrassed. And eventually I did tell him, I was like, hey, I just want you to know that like, this is my day, my day job is video editing. I have a degree in it. If you're interested, if you guys are interested in or need any help. So we ended up doing a test run of me editing a couple scenes, and they were like, yep, well, we're going to do that. So I ended up editing the film that I originally got cast for them, and just our first film so my first film with them, I starred in it and I edited their film, and we ended up just having such a great working relationship that I ended up working for the church remotely, doing video editing for them. And then obviously I've edited some of their films since then. I think I've edited in total, including Amazing Gracie and Fat Chance, I think 4 or 5 of their films. So it's just been such a great relationship. I've learned a ton. I think they've learned a ton. And it's just really cool to see how, just back to that collaborative effort, it's just really cool to see how God puts all of the puzzle pieces of the people together that make the movie.
Right. Listeners, I love doing this podcast. I hope deeply that you also enjoy listening. As we bring this content free of charge, I have some requests that will help it continue. We have exceeded 2,000 listens for the 24 Yes and 30 episodes. That doesn't include the YouTube listens. And none of it would have happened without Clemencia Villafuerte, our producer. I have to say that. I depend on her a great deal. In some ways, that number's great because I don't do much advertising or promotion. I depend on listeners to repost on social media and for the guests to post the links on their websites. On the other hand, it's really pretty low as the podcast world goes. Really, really low. So I can't monetize it, at least not yet. That's good and bad. You all don't have to listen to random commercials about who knows what. Yay! And I don't have any financial help. Boo. So here are the asks, as the trendy people say now. I'm not sure what was wrong with the word requests, but number 1, keep telling folks about this podcast. Even if it's just one that you particularly cared for, tell them about that one and they might get interested in the others. Of course, keep listening. 3rd, and here's the commercial part, buy my books to offset the costs of the podcast. I don't talk about them much because I'm really terrible at marketing.
I have several novels available on Amazon. You can look them up under Barbara G. Tucker or Barbara Graham Tucker, as in Graham Cracker, rolling my eyes. Or you can ask me for signed copies. The most recent, Sudden Future, by Colorful Crow Publishing, would make a great Christmas gift for a reader of any age. I will have another coming out before Christmas, Long Lost Justice. Others are Bringing Abundance Back, which I call the Southern Chick Lit book, Long Lost Family, a not-so-cozy mystery, Long Lost Promise, even less cozy. I haven't figured out how murders can be cozy. And The Unexpected Christmas Visitors, a story about refugees. All are on Kindle, too. Also, I have short Bible studies. I'm not at the GoFundMe point yet. Finally, buy the books of the folks I've interviewed here or will. Luke Manjay of Ginseng Diggers, Becky Woolley, Ray Atkins, Kami Ballantyne, Devereaux Shivington Stebbins, Susan Kirkland, Renee Winchester, Carly Land, David Cady, Millicent Flake, Noah Knox Marshall, and Amber Nagel. You are a person interested in the artistic community of Chattanooga, Northwest Georgia, and beyond. Help them out. Thank you for listening to this commercial.
Did the pastor have a background in film?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. From what I understand, they were doing really big theater productions, like theatrical productions. Mm-hmm. And then they got a script that they really liked from one of their congregants, and it was a true story, but they didn't want, it was like so many scenes, and in theater, you got to limit it. So they were like, this might be better as a film. Why don't we try our hand in that? And then they ended up switching from doing these big theater productions to just doing the films every year. Yeah, I think that's kind of how they switched from that. And then he's just done tons of research, taken lots of classes and things like that to hone in his skills as well, on top of being a lead pastor at a church.
Right. That's amazing. It was, I was listening to your podcast.
Yeah, no, I have a podcast with my mom called The Collaboration Conversation.
Right. Thank you. And you were interviewing or had as a guest the actress who plays your mom in the film. And that was a really interesting conversation because she had not been in really acting for a long time.
Right.
But you can really tell she's good. I mean, she knows how to really be on camera. And some people don't, She works hard, but man, she doesn't really have to. She's natural, and it just comes very easy. I shouldn't say it comes easy to her, because I said, she does a ton of work, but man, she makes it look easy. That's for sure. One of my favorite things is that every time we watch it, I always hear someone say, man, I just want to smack that mom. And that's just a testament to how good she is, because in real life, she's just the sweetest. This is Patty Lambert, and she's just wonderful. No one would ever want to smack her ever, but she does such a good job as the antagonistic mom in the film. And I also have to preface, my mom loves this joke that it's not a joke, but just that I preface that this character was not based on my mom. I always have to say that so she doesn't get in trouble. Yes, in my latest novel, the protagonist is a 30-year-old male, and I have to say, this is not my son.
So you get it.
Has nothing to do with him.
That's right.
So, yeah. One thing, of course, there are many things about Amazing Gracie that are amazing, but what I liked was the resolution, and that it was character driven, and it wasn't, everything's just happy, and the judge gives the aunt, the baby, and the little girl, and when that would be stretching credulity a little bit, but that you come to a resolution that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I like that a whole lot. And along with the acting being so real. And then also that it took us a while, but and on your journey, as your character's journey, it's like she's so bitter against her mom and about her dad dying. And then she realizes that how incredibly hard this has been on her mother. And she's been, I don't want to be ugly, but your character is just so about yourself. And that you just totally don't get that she's lost her daughter and her husband in a short period of time. And how hard that must be. And so no wonder the mother's bitter, and so negative, I guess, towards the remaining daughter. Who's you, the main character, It was like, wow. It was the kind of,
And I think that ended up being a really beautiful kind of sub theme, I would say, is that I think that in this day and age, everybody grieves. Not even this day and age. In general, people grieve differently. And I think that's okay. And I think that there is space, and there needs to be space and compassion for all the different ways that people need to grieve. And this just wasn't a very intense case of two people who grieve very differently. And it was unacceptable to both of them how the other one chose to grieve. And so I definitely hope, and I've talked to some folks who have seen the film, who have had, a familial loss, a loss of a son or a loss of a daughter, who have just said, you hit the nail on the head with some people are like, we're going to dwell on this and we're going to hold on to this grief as long as we can. And then there are some people who just have to try to move on in order to function. So I think just trying to show the respect, or I guess lack of respect, that they had for that in each other, and how forgive might not be the right word, but once you can reconcile that there are different ways to grieve and respect that in each other, man, that forgiveness of all the bitterness and the reconciliation can be super beautiful and super healing. So yeah, I love that ended up being, like I said, that wasn't necessarily a theme that I wanted to go from right off the bat, but I love that was a sub theme for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing about writing, is that sometimes people will, and I say this in a good way, sometimes it happens in a bad way, but people will find something in it that resonates with them that wasn't really your primary thing. You were only maybe even halfway conscious of it. And, and they, for example, in my latest novel, I don't want to talk about myself, but the mother of the character is in hospice and is dying of cancer. And I wrote about that from my own experience, but a friend of mine said that was the part she didn't like in the book, because she had just lost her mom in the last year, and the more thing. So, and that was, okay.
Yeah, for sure. You just never know who's going to get their hands on it and how it's going to impact them, and how their story is going to play into it. There have been several people who have said that they have gone through the foster system or the adoption system, and trying to watch that play out on screen was, maybe not painful, but it definitely brought up a lot of emotions of the tension that is being held between what's going to happen to these children, and you hope for the best. And obviously like we said, we like the ending on this one, but man, that's kind of the beautiful part. And obviously you were just talking about how it wasn't her favorite part of your book, but I'm sure with someone else, it resonated with them and they were able to relate better and things like that. So that's another beautiful part, I guess, of what we do is as creators, is we get to tell stories that people connect to, for sure, good or bad.
So I'm sure that you have heard all the bad critiques of so-called Christian movies.
Yeah.
So, I sometimes wonder if there is such a thing as a Christian film or a Christian movie. So how do you respond to those critiques? And what do you think, can be done about it, is being done about it? I think it's getting better.
Yeah.
My friends in the industry are trying to make it better.
I'm with you. I would tell you that part of me is one of those critics, unfortunately. I will be the first to confess that, for sure. But at the same time, I would agree with your friends that, and you, that it is getting better, that we are making strides toward more mainstream availability of these films. I think for me, there is a difference between a Christian film and a faith-based film. Now, I would tell you that I think Amazing Gracie is a Christian film in a sense that we talk about Jesus, we talk about God. There's not a salvation scene in this movie, but a lot of the films that I've made in the past have a salvation scene, which to me, check that off. It's a Christian film. Now, some of the other movies I've written are faith-based, where you just have these redemptive themes that are making people just better people and giving them hope and pointing them towards the fruit of the Spirit and things like that. And so I think in the overtly Christian world, it is such a, I don't know how I want to say this. It feels like all of our eggs are in a couple of different baskets. You have these bigger companies that have the money to make these films that are beautiful that people want to watch. They're able to pay, the writers and things like that, where you have independent films that are really struggling to compete. And it's not a competition, but at the same time, the resources aren't spread around. I know that if that makes any sense. And I don't want to make it all about money, because it's not, but ultimately you want a good writer. You got to be able to pay for a good writer, right? Those kinds of things. And so I think that we live in a world right now where a lot of people have this mentality of just grab your phone. You can make a film on your phone, which is true. And you're going to get, a grab your phone quality film. And so I guess my biggest encouragement to folks who want to see a change in this, and if you're passionate about seeing Christian films or faith-based films in the mainstream, in theaters or on your streaming platforms, is like find local filmmakers or regional filmmakers, watch their films, find somebody that you really believe in and that you like, invite them to dinner, learn about them, treat, some of us, I would tell you, myself included, treat this as our mission field. So meet them just like you would, like you would want to embrace a missionary into your home, talk to them, get to know their story, what kind of films they want to make. And then if you're interested, support them, and if you are able to invest in a film, or at the very least, just be praying for their next project. I mean, those are the things that are going to help shape, in my opinion, this next kind of trajectory of Christian films that's currently happening. And with all of the different streaming services, I mean, everything is just becoming so much more accessible, but we're still not, it still feels like we're not on the bigger platforms yet. We're still on the smaller side, which is fine for now, but we want to reach the masses. That's the calling. So yeah, if that's something you're passionate about, I definitely think it's important to think of Christian filmmaking as a mission field, because it is. We go to battle. The enemy is at work against it. There's all kinds of resources that they need in order to make a good film. So in my mind, that's why I stopped being a critic. I was like, I was critiquing a bunch of stuff that I wasn't actually supporting. So now I'm in it, and now I get it. And I'm like, I'm going to stop doing that, because these people are doing their absolute best with the resources that they were given.
Mm-hmm. That's really a good word. Thank you. So when you and I talked before at the screening, we talked about your interest in the deconstruction and the book Death by Deconstruction, which is in my cart in Amazon. I just haven't pushed the button yet. And you've been doing some reading and research, and I think you said you're going to make a film about deconstructing faith.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Very interesting. I don't understand all of it, but
well, neither do I, which is why I'm so interested in it. And this is actually the first time I've ever talked about this on a podcast or anything. And so you'll have to bear with me as this is the first time I've kind of publicly, I guess, talked about this, but I just have a heart for those who have deconstructed. I think right now the deconstruction movement, and I put the deconstruction in quotation marks because it's just become this catch-all word for leaving the church. And I think, it reminds me of like in the 90s and early 2000s, people would say, I'm wrestling with my faith. I think it's just a new word for that. And I think I got into it. Obviously, I read this book last year, and it's Death to Deconstruction by Josh Porter. He's a pastor as well. in, I think, this Washington State area. He's awesome. And I just loved this book. Deconstruction had been kind of in my circle of friends, just folks realizing that what they had been taught growing up doesn't sit well with them anymore. And so basically, I think what is happening, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with the word deconstruction. It means just to reduce something down to its parts in order to reevaluate or reinterpret them. I'm here for that. I think that there are some very toxic things that I was taught growing up in church that were kind of more scare tactic based that I don't actually believe now. So those are some things I have personally deconstructed, right? The word deconstructed or deconstruction doesn't bother me. It's just become this, like I said, kind of catch off or, well, I've deconstructed, and like as if that's the end of what you're supposed to do. But the end of the definition is that you're then going to reinterpret them or reconstruct something.
Right.
And so I think for me, it becomes about these people in my life and people across the world, but especially in my millennial age range, where it's just become too much work for them to find the nuances of the Bible and to be able to take things that are really hard to swallow and accept them as the truth and accept them as God's word, because socially it's not acceptable. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard topics. I'm not saying it's, well, just swallow it and let it be and give it up to God. Cause as you saw in the movie, Amazing Gracie, that's like my least favorite things is when people just say, give it up to God, which is, there's validity to that statement, but just choosing not to dive into the nuance and choosing not to go to the Lord with these questions is not the answer. You have to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think it becomes too hard for them or too much work for them. And it's just so much easier to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, well, I deconstructed and that's all I'm going to do. Whereas I feel like if you can picture a house for me, right, you have, then it's representing your faith and the walls and the furniture. And those are all of the theologies that you've been taught or that you believe in. Well, so for me, a big one is purity culture. While I think that there is absolute validity in saving yourself and purity is a good thing, the way that I was taught about purity was not great. So I'm going to take that couch and I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to get me a new couch or, whatever it is. We might knock down a wall, but the point is you don't knock down a wall or take the furniture out because they no longer serve you. And then you just leave the house like that and you just walk away. You're supposed to reconstruct something. So I know that that's a long-winded metaphor, but I feel like most people who are deconstructing start with the most best of intentions, which is to truly find who Jesus is to them and continue to build that relationship and to dive into the Bible. And then it becomes too hard. And then there's this incredible pressure from peers and just from life in order to have all the answers. And you just don't. And that has a tension that is really hard to sit in, and they don't want to sit in it anymore. And honestly, I don't blame them sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this tension is so, and then making a film about it. I can't even think about that right now because I'm so pregnant, but making a film about that, I'm going to have to sit in that tension and embrace that tension and encourage others to embrace that tension and the nuances and encourage them to go, always to go back to the word and always go back to prayer. But that's such a hard thing to say to someone who feels like they have to have the answers at all times. So all that to be said is I just feel like it's a movement that is rooted in good things. It's rooted in getting rid of some of the really painful parts that people have misinterpreted God's word, right? So they're doing good work, but it's not finished. They have to keep going. Anyway, I know that was long-winded, and I am not I'm not an expert, and I just have a passion for it. I just have seen it. I've seen how it has been painful to people that I love. And so I just want to encourage folks that deconstruction is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but I really want to encourage you that from that deconstruction, always seek Jesus, always seek God, always go to the word so that you can reconstruct, your theology around him and what he has to say, no matter how hard it is.
Yeah. The word I thought of when you were talking is ambiguity. Is that we have to become, I don't want to use the word comfortable, but accepting of ambiguity, and that we're never promised to have all the answers.
Right.
And it seems to me that the idea that we should have all the answers is the first thing we ought to deconstruct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Because you don't. And I think one of the things that I have really questioned about, you talk about purity culture. I was too old for that, but the whole, my generation is more into the political stuff, which I know affects the millennials too, because I have a son about your age, and so that's a big tension for them.
Yeah.
That we talk, evangelicals and Christians of that stripe talk about God like they've got him figured out.
Right.
And I'm like, where do y'all come up with this stuff?
Right.
Why do you make these, God won't do this, or God always does this? Why? You're taking one verse out of context and making it, extrapolating it so much into everywhere that there's some ambiguity here. You don't get to make those statements, and yet people do. And then if you're raised in that and it falls apart, obviously you're going to have faith problems.
Yeah. Your foundation's going to be shaken.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that doesn't even get into the political thing where people are so incongruous and inconsistent, which we don't need to go there. But
anyway. I'm with you though. And I think if we knew everything about God and we knew why he was doing everything, and we knew exactly, and we had all of the answers, where does faith come in? Like, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the basic part of having faith is that there is something greater than you that you don't understand, that you don't know, but that you trust in, and we are servants and we are citizens of his kingdom. And in that, we have to submit to that king, and we're not going to know everything about him. We're just not. And so I think, and to say that we do is pride. And I think that that is something that the enemy thrives in, is prideful people. I think we recently, in the same book club that we read, Death to Deconstruction, we just read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and he talks about pride being like the sin that the enemy is able to hold on to and really use. And so I do think you're right. I think that idea of we have to have all the answers is just another form of pride, and we have to be able to let that go. We have to be able to let that go. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's when deconstruction is the end of the sentence. Oh, well, I deconstructed, and I just want to be like, neat. And what have you rebuilt? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You need to use it as the end of your story, or as the end of your faith. Means you abandoned it. All right. I'd rather you just be honest, be like, I abandoned my faith because it doesn't serve me anymore. And so it's too hard to explain, and I don't want to do it anymore. To me, true deconstruction is, like I said, where you are able to spirit-led discern what you have learned and what you believe, and turn to the word, turn to prayer, and figure out who God is to you and who Jesus is and his character, and rebuilding your faith from that versus what you taught your whole life. That's deconstruction and reconstruction. And so that, like you can hear, I have a passion for it. I have no idea what story I'm going to tell about it.
Okay.
But I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I can see you coming up with a good story though from that.
I hope so. And I hope it's not personal, because I've got too many personal stories about it. I got to find something that hasn't actually happened to me. Yeah.
And I think something you said earlier about telling a woman's side of the story, I think that's really important. Because there's always a default in those situations to men's stories.
Sure.
And I imagine there are more male filmmakers for whatever reason than there are female.
and especially more male Christian. Again, air quotes.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Or faith-based ones as well. So, well, Sarah, it has been great to have you on here. This has been a terrific conversation. I think we could go on longer, but you are a filmmaker, a writer, actress, editor, and mover and shaker.
I'm so grateful, so grateful that you had me on, and I know you got to see it. But if anyone is interested in watching Amazing Gracie, you could buy a DVD at projectbrickworks.org/store. That's my nonprofit that I help run, projectbrickworks.org. And then you could also, if you're interested in streaming, you can rent or buy it on Amazon Prime, YouTube, Google Play. And then if you have a subscription to Tubi, it is currently on there for free. Anyway, thank you for letting me share it with your students and with you, and now sharing me with your listeners. I'm just super grateful. And I love how when God connects people like this, it's just so awesome.
It is fabulous.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.